Welcome, everyone. I'm sorry that I can't chat with you, and yet the conversation is going to keep on going because, there are comments under the videos if you want to leave something for me that I can respond at a later time. If you have a thought or an observation. And even though this is the final class in this experiment, this live streaming series, this will not be the end of the conversation and of the teaching and learning that we're all doing together in community. So at this moment, I do not have a plan to repeat this particular format of teaching. It's been a pretty brisk pace for me to do one of these every single week. And I think that perhaps it's been a little bit for you guys as well, because there has been a little bit less participation than I anticipated. And I think maybe it's because I've overwhelmed you. So I'm going to take some time and kind of regroup and think about it, and we'll try something else in the future. So if you have thoughts or ideas or things you want to learn about, as always, let me know. And whether that's in a format like this or in videos or blog posts or courses or what, I always try to listen and offer what I can. But all of that housekeeping aside, I want us to close this foundational series in which we're really talking about the fundamentals of herbal medicine. And I want to do that from the perspective that in order to work with medicine of any kind, we started this journey talking about the nature of poisons, the nature of medicine. What are we talking about with this sort of pursuit? Then we talked about specific traditions from around the world and the flavors of those traditions, what those traditions are like, what might draw you to them or not draw you to them. And then this month in June, we've been focusing on yourself as a wounded person and as a healer, which I think we all are. We're all here with wounds, and we are all here with gifts to offer into the world, and hopefully to leave the world slightly better than we found it, even in a very small, sort of within the small scope of our influence. So we're closing this whole journey about the foundations of herbal medicine, talking about how to be a human. And it might seem like this is not related to herbal medicine, but herbal medicine, like many other disciplines, all other human disciplines, is a human endeavor. And the more capable you are at being a human, the more I believe you're going to be able to access herbal medicine, the support that you need to find it, to differentiate what's good for you, what's not good for you, who to work with, who not to work with, trusting your intuition, all that kind of stuff. And the more capable you will be in offering and sharing this practice with other people if that's part of your path, and I know it is for some of you. So really, your humanity and our shared humanity is the basis for everything that we do. And it is very specifically related to any kind of medicine because it is the condition of being human that makes it necessary for us to have medicine and healing practices. So these things are very much intertwined. And the reason for the title of this talk, it's a little bit of an inside joke that I have with myself that I titled this talk in this way because many of you know that I have a background in theater. And when I first started in theater, I didn't realize this, but I got into it because I was looking for healing. And over the years, as I got a lot of the healing that I wanted, and then I became really interested in sharing theater with other people, with people who weren't necessarily trained actors, especially with people who weren't trained actors, and gathering stories and making work. And in 2010, I co-created and co-directed a play titled How to Be a Human, which my co-director and I thought was a very silly, terrible title at first, and then we came to love it. And so, in fact, a lot of what we're talking about today, these questions of how to live a good life, how to care for ourselves, how to find meaning, a lot of the skills and technologies that I'm going to be sharing with you today are things that I have learned and practiced much better in the theater than in the kind of healing work that I do now, which involves a lot of sitting on my butt and listening to people and looking up things in reference books and that sort of thing. So these practices for being human are, I think, very much linked with creativity, spirituality, philosophy, and common sense. So it feels like a fitting place to end this journey, kind of bringing in some things from a little bit beyond the realm of the plants. I really miss the chat. I really miss not being able to hear from you guys. I'm so sorry that that's not working today. So please promise me that any thoughts and ideas you have, you'll put them in the comments and I can read them later. Okay. So these are some thoughts that I have about how to be a human. The first is, I think we can recognize the importance or the essential idea behind what I'm describing in this talk. If we think about the words humanize and dehumanize. So if you've ever had an experience of being dehumanized, I hope it was a mild one. But, we've all had the experience of calling a customer service agency, right? Or, God, when I call my health insurance company, or you're in some anonymous situation dealing with a big faceless company or a bureaucracy, and you're not being brutalized or mistreated, hopefully, but there is something dehumanizing about it. You're kind of being treated like a number, or there isn't time for your story, or you're dealing with like dialing in to one of those touchpad things, and you can all you can do is choose numbers, and none of them describe your situation, and there's nothing for you to do. These kinds of things that we can all feel what happens to you in a moment like that, when there isn't space for you to be a human. And then, of course, this goes to much darker depths if we extend that concept of dehumanization out further and further. It is a common feature of mass atrocity that when one group of human beings starts describing another group of human beings as if they are not human beings, as if they are insects or disease or non-human animals or something less than or other. That when we do this, it is a precursor to all kinds of violence and suffering. And if you have ever been mistreated in this way on the basis of any aspect of your identity, who you are, where you come from, what you look like, if you have ever had that experience, you know inside what it does to you. And this is a state that shuts us down and is very harmful to our health and well-being. It doesn't allow us to think, doesn't allow us to access kind of that prefrontal cortex where we can regulate our emotions and think and feel. So if you've felt that sense of being shut down or frustrated or frozen, from being dehumanized. That is a biological reality. And, a lot of times our inner conversations mirror the kinds of outer dynamics that can happen in the world. So perhaps you wouldn't think of it as dehumanizing to let yourself work so much that you are kind of ground down, that there isn't any time or space for you to think your own thoughts and breathe and be with your friends and family and have a full life. But the inner conversation that tells you that all that you're worth is your ability to work or your ability to please other people, that's a dehumanizing inner conversation. And so a lot of times where I see people get stuck on their healing journeys has to do with ways that they are not allowing themselves their full humanity, or that they're not humanizing themselves in their experience. This can go in the other direction too. So if you don't, if you go past, you sort of think of yourself as something more than human, greater than human, then we can get into a place of taking on too much responsibility, which can result in overwork, exhaustion, this sort of thing. Can also be the kinds of destructive acts that come from feeling entitled, that come from feeling that the world owes you something, that you're meant for bigger and better things. And instead of coming from a place of humility, and really being in touch with your humanity. So on either side, those inner conversations can be damaging. And these practices for coming back, for humanizing ourselves, are an antidote to all of those forms of internal violence and inflation that trip people up. So okay, here's the first thing that I think is instantly humanizing for everybody involved. And I don't know of any other creatures that do this. There might be some, but I'm not aware of any other creatures that do this. It is human to listen to and learn from stories. Listen to and learn from stories. And it's a remarkable thing. I want you to feel inside, what is the difference between when you learn a fact through memorization or study or research versus when you hear a story and you learn something from it? I know we don't have the chat, but I want you to pause nevertheless and actually think through this question for yourself. What's the difference? How does it feel different if you learn a fact versus if you hear a story and learn something, draw your own meaning, your own learning from the story? I was having a conversation with a client today about something kind of like this, and we were describing it as, what is the value of your experience, your own experience? And I think that stories, this methodology of telling stories and learning from stories, and how we have built this up, and all human cultures do this. This is a technology for passing on meaning, things that are meaningful. And this is a lot of what I think drew me to the theater in the first place. And I think there is a way that now that so many, we encounter a lot of stories every day, and the sources of them tend to be two different sources. One is advertising. Advertisers are constantly thinking about how to tell you a story that's going to make you want to buy their thing. And if you start looking at ads like this, if you start looking and asking, like, what's the story they're telling, it really starts to reveal a lot of things to you. It's a very interesting exercise. And the other place where we get a lot of our stories are through the entertainment industry, television and movies. And this is not to make those things bad at all. But I think that the most humanizing way to do this is to sit down with other humans and actually tell each other some stories. And if you have, I'm going to go even a step further here and suggest that if you have living relatives, mentors, community members who are in their elder years, and you have the sense that they have any stories left to tell you that you haven't heard, I can think of very few things that I would more universally recommend as part of your humanizing of yourself, of that other person, and something very beneficial to do for the greater good than making a point to listen to those stories. The exchange of stories does something for the receiver and for the speaker. And I think it's something that is easy to skip over or discount or forget that we're missing. But if you remember what it was like when you were young, and you're had sleepaway camp for the first time and you stayed up all night telling stories with your friends, or when you're in a new relationship and that person tells you an important story from their past for the first time, it gives you a little taste of the way that exchange can help you to feel alive and whole and human. Apart from that, you also learn practical things that help you to navigate in your life and in the world. So when somebody thinks there's a story that's worth telling, or if it's funny or it's moving or it's sad, whatever emotion it evokes, it's also usually our brains find it interesting. We find it interesting because there's something in it that we can learn from, or we can learn from a mistake or a success, or we can get information that will help us on our own journeys. So it's also very practical. So I think this human to human level of story sharing is very important. And then this also can extend to the level of I think a lot of these little stories, the little stories of our lives over however many years and centuries and through the minds of artists and conversation and storytellers, civilizations build up these big stories that become mythology or, religious teaching, cultural norms. And listening to those kinds of stories, those big stories, is also very humanizing and has lots of information for you. So if it's not possible to do some in-person story exchange or some human-to-human story exchange, then a really good option is to go back to classic literature or film, or to be aware of what the popular stories that are happening, that are being told around you in the form of the entertainment industry are. You can learn a lot about where your culture is headed if you pay attention to the stories that people are telling. So this is my first technology for being human. Okay, next one. This I think is so important in a world that is increasingly technology. You're interfacing with technology all the time. It can make us forget that we are embodied creatures that have a body, that are a body and mind that is not, we can't separate. So the second sort of tip or technology for being human is something that any of you who've observed a small child will instantly recognize, that all kids do this. And it goes like this. Try things with your body and see what happens. This also works to some extent without, when I wrote this, I put try things in parentheses with your body, exclamation point, and see what happens. This does work with speech, for example. But if you can do this in an embodied way, it's better, and I'm going to explain why. This is a big part of why I was drawn to theater. I didn't know it at the time, and why it was so profound for me when I was working with non-actors. I made theater with housing activists who were also homeless in the Bronx in New York, with teenage girls in foster care in New York City who were pregnant, with senior citizens from various walks of life in Washington, D.C., a broad spectrum of people who didn't have any training in acting, but they would always be able to kind of get into a physical position, act something out with their bodies, and it would be brilliant, and it would contain all of this information about the situation or the characters or what they were imagining, or things that they needed to express that weren't so easy to say in words. And there's a reason for it. There's a reason why we can kind of access things in the body first, and it has to do with the way that our brains develop, that idea of the triune brain. So, for example, when children are growing up, and there's a concept called the conservation of mass. So if you have two glasses, you have like a short, fat glass, you have a tall, skinny glass, and you have the same amount of, the short glass is like half full. You take the short, fat glass in front of a child, maybe 5 years old, and you pour the water from it into the tall, skinny glass. And the tall, skinny glass, the water goes up, like to here. Or in the short, fat glass, it's only like this. And the 5-year-old will say, if you ask them which one has more water, or do they have the same amount of water, the 5-year-olds will say the tall, skinny glass has more water. By the time kids are maybe 7 or 8 years old, they can all say it's the same amount of water when you pour it from one glass to the other. The amount of water doesn't change. But there's something really interesting that happens in the middle, in between those two ages, in that developmental period where their brains are kind of figuring this out. And what will happen is, kids, it's really cool if you ever see video of these experiments. Kids will start to gesture. They will make hand movements that show that they understand, and their bodies understand that it's the same amount of water from one to the other. But they will say the wrong answer. But they'll have it in their body first. Or similarly, if you get kids, I guess around the same age, like 5, 6 years old, like kindergartners, and they are playing a game together, they can play the game, But if you take them individually out of the game and you ask each child, what are the rules of this game? How does this game work? They tell you some rules that are correct, but not all of them, and then they tell you some other things that don't make sense, and all of the kids tell you something different. But even though they can't articulate it in language, they can play the game because in their bodies, they understand what to do, and together in the group they are able to act out what to do, even if they can't think it or say it in words. So part of what this means is that the cutting edge of your understanding in life, whatever that is, wherever your edge of growth and learning happens to be, you will not be able to put it into words today, that stuff that's just beyond the edge of what you already know, but you will be able to act it out in your body. It's profound to think about that. We have this bias in Western culture that says that our brains are where we think and where the intelligence lives within us. And it's such a silly folk understanding of the brain when we think that, because we only really mean this one tiny aspect that we're aware of what our thinking mind feels like to us on the inside. Your brain is doing so much stuff that you have no idea that it's doing all the time. It's still part of your brain. So really, it's more accurate to say that we believe that our disembodied consciousness and intelligence is what allows us to learn and push the edge. And it's not. It's our bodies connected with, then later, applying our reasoning and our language and being able to articulate and describe what we've experienced. But it's really the body that goes first and that's on the cutting edge. So it's really worth letting yourself try things physically that are outside of your comfort zone. So here's what a lot of you are going to be sitting there thinking, what in the world does that mean? So I'll give you some examples. Tell you an example from my own life in the last 6 months. So I have never been, up until recently, I've never been a clothes person, a person who understands fashion or how to dress myself or any of that stuff. As many of you who've known me for some time can attest, because you've seen all of my yoga pants and all of my, videos I make wearing the same 3, athleisure tops for many years. So at some point in the last 6 months, I tried something different with my body in, embodying. I put on different clothes that were different from what I had worn before. And then I went places wearing them. And I noticed what it made me feel and how I felt. And I've learned things by doing something different in that regard that I couldn't have learned, or I couldn't have articulated those understandings before I tried it, before I just went there. So that's one sort of simple and not that threatening example. So wear something different. Doesn't have to be fancy or makeover-y, just something different that's not what you normally wear. Another possibility would be something like, try to learn a new skill that involves using your body. So if you don't cook, try cooking. If you have never taken an aerial yoga class, or you've never gone swimming, or you've never gone on a mushroom hunt in the woods, All of these things are things you could try with your body and then see what happens. If you've never been to an art museum, go to an art museum physically with your body and see what you notice, see what happens. There are so many other places we could go in thinking of examples of things that you could act out, that you could embody. If you're thinking about a possible career change, is there a volunteer position that you could take that would allow you to enact some similar kinds of skills or roles so that you could try it on and see how it feels, discover. And then if you want to, oh, and this is a good one, talking with your hands actually is a little mini version of this. So if you're having a hard time putting something into words, if there's something you're trying to describe, use your hands to try to sketch it out or put it out there somehow. There are those of us like myself who cannot help it and just do this all the time. But if it doesn't come naturally to you, try it and see if it helps. And then if you want to be really brave or really humanized, you could think about taking a class that would be, in something like theater or a performing art of some kind, where you use your body to communicate, where you learn to sing, or you learn to play an instrument, or you take an improv class. When you have a safe place, like within the arts, to let stuff come up and express it, that often becomes a playground that then you take learnings about yourself or about life and extract them from that context and then use it all over the place. So try stuff with your body and see what happens. Try something different. And, it's important for learning to feel safe enough. But it's also important, you can't learn something new in a completely safe place where there's nothing new to explore. So part of this, the challenge of finding the right thing here, is to have just enough challenge and newness and also enough safety so that you can experiment and learn. That's why a class environment is often really nice. Okay. All right, 2 more. Let me see. Maybe I'll just try connecting with the chat one more time while I keep going here, just in case I can hear from your lovely selves. Okay. The next one, I think there are other animals that do this. Oh, and other animals definitely, other species trying things with their bodies and seeing what happens. That's how that's how it is to be an animal. So that's not unique to us. But I think that in this world we live in that's so mediated by technology, we forget that that's a big part of what being human, being on this planet is about, and a really good way to learn and feel alive. Oh, you guys are here. I see you. I see some chats. Hi, Em. Hi, Kayla. Hi, Joy. It's so great to see you guys. And then it just says unable to connect to chat again. So I know you're here, and I'm glad to see you. Okay. So the third one, I think other creatures do this too. But I also think this is deeply, deeply humanizing. And the best way I can put this into words is to encourage us all to gaze with awe into the unknown. The idea of awe, being awestruck, something being awesome, it's like in the sound of that word is kind of the meaning that we need experiences that remind us how small and close to the ground we are compared to how big and unknowable the universe is. That feeling of awe connects us to a vein of meaning, a vein of sensing the meaning in our existence, the significance of our existence, without tempting us into a place of getting sort of in delusions of grandeur and thinking that we're, controlling everything. We're not control. We're controlling so little, almost nothing. And it's important to practice this because the unknown can be very scary. People tell me not infrequently, I don't know how you have your own business. I would be so scared to do that. And I say to them, yeah, tell me about it. Like, not only do I have my own business, I'm an herbalist, and half people don't even know what that is. And most of the herbalists I know really don't make a living doing this. So yeah, it's scary. It's very unknown. And every week or every month, I gaze, sometimes awestruck, sometimes terrified, into the unknown of what is our experience going to be this month or this week? What's going to happen when this client takes these herbs? I mean, that feels a lot less unknown, but there's always a small element. There's always a small element of chance, and you can't know it perfectly. And what has allowed me to do this thing that feels very risky to most people, and I'm not encouraging you to like start your own business or something. This is just, I can speak from my own experience here. There will be a version of this in your life. The place where you need to encounter the unknown in your life may have nothing to do with work and livelihood. It may have to do with, relationships and family, with your own healing, with your past. It may have to do with moving to a new place, any number of things, starting a new creative endeavor or program of study. There's so many ways you can engage with the unknown. What has allowed me to do this is remembering that even if I were working in a steady job where I got a paycheck and everything was, set up nicely to be predictable, that even still, the unknown is always there and there are no guarantees. And so by remembering this and by intentionally choosing to gaze awestruck into the unknown, it helped me to make friends with it enough that I could say, well, if it's all going to be, if tomorrow is unknown anyway, maybe I'll choose the path that feels like it's the most meaningful to me, like it would be the most rewarding. And I don't know if I will succeed or if I'll fail, but I do know that I feel like the pursuit will be meaningful. And I don't know whether I would succeed or fail in a really predictable kind of situation either. I truly don't know in any situation. So I might as well, with my eyes open and my heart open, choose the path that feels meaningful to me. When you make friends with the unknown, it tends to help you become a little bit more brave. It tends to help you remember that as big of a deal as all the things in your life are, they're small compared to the wholeness of being and existence. And that can be a relief. It can really be a relief. And there is an inherently spiritual feeling about, gazing at the unknown, looking up at the sky full of stars, seeing an incredible landscape in front of you. Or even, looking at a brand new baby where who they are going to become, or what it's like inside them as they're sleeping, so sweetly and peacefully. There's unknown there too. These things bring forth a spiritual dimension of our experience that can invite you into a deeper relationship with your understanding of divinity and holiness, the sacred. And that is very humanizing as well. It's really good medicine. One more thought about staring awestruck into the unknown. It's very humanizing for the people in your life who you know very well. After a certain period of time, we tend to create almost like a caricature of the people in our lives. Like we've mapped them pretty well. We know a lot of what they're going to say and do because we know them. And so our minds are trying to be helpful, kind of skip over a little bit of the details sometimes, and they don't fully listen and they don't really take it all in. They kind of think, oh, yeah, like I know what you're going to say. And that's dehumanizing for the person. If you've had somebody that you care about do that to you, I'm sure we all have. We've all done it and we've all received it. It doesn't feel great. So remember that if you imagine someone's eyes as the windows to their soul, as the saying has it, that you can gaze awestruck into the unknown that is the universe within another human being. The people in your life, the people you pass on the street, their eyes open up inside to an entire universe of experience and history and thoughts and being and secrets, suffering and joy, triumphs, all of that stuff. Every single human. And if you are in a relationship of any kind, work, romantic, familial, that has become challenging or stale or boring or routine, pausing and taking a breath and practicing awe in front of the endless unknown that remains in that person that you, even the person that you know so well, that is something to try, to act out with your body and see what kind of magic happens. I don't always remember to do that, but when I do it, it has never let me down. Okay. So those are my 3 practices for how to be a human. Listen to and learn from stories. Try things with your body and see what happens. And gaze awestruck into the unknown whenever possible. And I think if we could all practice these things, all of the medicine that we access, herbal, conventional, otherwise, will work better, and maybe we wouldn't need quite so much of it. And wouldn't that be nice? It would be nice. All right, my darlings. So with that, we conclude this series, and I've really enjoyed spending this time with you, and thank you for being here, for your attention. And I look forward to whatever is going to come next. I gaze into the unknown of what is on the horizon for us. But as always, I would love to hear your ideas and suggestions and your feedback, what you've liked, what you haven't liked, if I were to do this whole thing over again, which I'm not, if I were, how would you like me to do it differently so that it would work better for you? Because I can incorporate that feedback into whatever I create next. So thank you, and good night, and I love you guys, and you're excellent humans, every single one of you. I'm so honored to know you and to get to hang out with you like this. So, mwah! Good night, and I will talk to all of you soon.